Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping back to the 1740s to look at this really wild idea. Imagine trying to change the entire world, not with armies, not with politics, but with prayer. We're talking about what might just be the very first global viral movement, a network built on nothing but synchronized hope. It's a fascinating story.
And this one verse, this was it. This was the rallying cry for the whole thing. It all boiled down to this one huge question. What would happen if we could get people, everyone, all over the world, to pray for the exact same thing at the exact same time? What could that actually do?
So, where does a big idea like this even start? Well, what's so cool about this is that it didn't begin with some famous big-shot leader. No, it started in Scotland with just a small group of ministers who were honestly just really worried about the state of the world.
Yeah, they looked around in 1744, and what they saw, they called it spiritual calamities. They just felt like everything was falling apart. And they decided, you know what? The only thing big enough to fix this is if we all get together and pray. I'm talking about a united, extraordinary prayer for a huge global revival. Basically, a collective SOS to the heavens.
And get this, what started as just a little local 2-year plan, it took off. It spread like wildfire. By 1746, they'd printed up this formal proposal. They called it a memorial, and they started sending it out everywhere to get more people on board. And before you know it, just a few years later, this idea makes its way across the Atlantic Ocean and ends up with one of the biggest thinkers in colonial America.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. When the theologian Jonathan Edwards gets a hold of this idea in America, he doesn't just see, a nice prayer meeting. No way. He sees something massive, something cosmic. He sees the key to unlocking ancient biblical prophecy.
So Edwards basically takes this Scottish idea and cranks it up to 11. For him, this concert of prayer, as they called it, wasn't just about making people a little more religious. No, he saw it as the trigger, the thing that could kickstart the prophesied transformation of the entire globe. Think about that, a simple, practical thing that people could do, and it could unlock a whole divine plan.
Okay, so what was this prophecy? What was this big, world-changing thing that Edwards thought a global prayer chain could set in motion? What was the engine driving all of this?
He called it the latter-day glory. And it's super important to understand this was not about the end of the world, not an apocalypse. It was the opposite. It was about a future golden age right here on Earth, a time of incredible peace, understanding, and harmony that he was convinced was just around the corner.
And he looked at prophecies like this one from the book of Daniel. You know about a small stone that grows into a huge mountain and fills the whole earth? Well, Edwards saw this coordinated prayer as that stone. It was this small, humble grassroots thing that regular people could do. But with a little divine help, he believed it could grow into something massive, a great mountain that would cover the world in peace.
Look at the scale of this vision. This wasn't about getting a few more people to show up to church on Sunday. This was a blueprint for completely remaking society. We're talking about the end of all wars, an end to all the fighting and division, a brand new age where everyone had knowledge and lived in holiness. It's a huge deal.
Okay, so that's the grand vision, right? World peace, the whole shebang. But how do you actually do that? How does it work for a regular person, say, in Boston or back in Glasgow? What was the plan?
Well, the plan, the one they laid out in that memorial, was actually incredibly simple, super clear. It was a totally voluntary, 7-year agreement. All you had to do was set aside a little time each week on Saturday evening and Sunday morning, and then a bit more time once every 3 months. That's it. That's how you join the global concert.
And here's what was so smart about it. The organizers were really careful. They said, look, this is not some new, rigid rule. We're not making these days holy. It's not a vow you can't break. It was just a friendly agreement, a tool. And the goal was twofold. 1, to help everyone stay focused, and 2, and this is the big one, to know that as you were praying, thousands of other people were praying for the exact same thing at the exact same time. That idea alone was supposed to be incredibly encouraging.
And you know what? It worked. This simple, flexible idea, it absolutely caught on. It spread way, way further than those ministers back in Scotland could have ever dreamed.
The response was just incredible. In Glasgow alone, you had more than 45 different prayer groups signing up. Huge numbers of people got on board all across England. And they sent out almost 500 copies of the plan to North America, reaching people from New England all the way down to Georgia. It was like they built this huge invisible web, all connected by the same hope and the same schedule.
And this is a really key point, especially for that time period. The movement was deliberately inclusive. The organizers were like, hey, we don't care if you're a Baptist or a Congregationalist or something else. The invitation was open to anyone who cared about what they called vital Christianity, basically a real living faith. It was about unity, not division.
When you boil it all down, the whole thing was this powerful statement about collective action. Edwards would point to scripture that says, where 2 or 3 are gathered, amazing things can happen. So the concert of prayer was just that simple idea, but scaled up to a global level. The core belief was that the combined, united hope of thousands of people could do things that no single person ever could.
And that really leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? One that's just as relevant today as it was back then. What does happen when thousands, or maybe even millions of people, all separated by oceans, by cultures, all decide to focus their hope, their intention on one single thing, all at the same time? What is the real power of an idea that unites us?